Facebook, and I'm going to start. So I've started the recording also, and then I'm going to. Okay, and let's see. Can I? All right, participants. Here we go. Om Ajnanatirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All right, dear devotees, welcome to our Brahma Samhita class after a break of almost 3 weeks. And we did 10 verses from Brahma Samhita. Now that is an achievement. It's got about 62 verses inside it. And we did 10. And I have to tell you this, that the verses in the beginning of Brahma Samhita are more difficult than after you come to Chintamani, Prakara, Sadmashu. You know, it softens a little bit, but still not, but then it's not as mind-boggling as it is in the beginning. So we are slowly but steadily crossing that and going over. So okay, let's get going and bring up verse number 51, 11, not 51, 5.11, not 51, and all right. So when we were reading Brahma Samhita in the beginning, we were talking about that Krishna has got, in the very first verse, right? To his forms, we attribute 3 things to Krishna. Do you remember from the very first verse of Brahma Samhita? And actually, why don't I just show that verse to you so that it'll be a recap for all of you. So bringing up Brahma Samhita 1, but I won't give you the translation for that. I'm just going to give you the verse, and from here, try to tell me what are the 3 aspects that we talk about Krishna. Take out your chat.
He's Sachidanand Swarup.
And, you're supposed to type.
He's Sarvakaran.
You're supposed to type. Take out your chat boxes and type it in. Type in the answer, and I can see somebody has typed into the chat, and Sadhna Mataji has typed something. Let me see. Blissful. Yes, that's one of them. Satchit Anand Vigraha. So, what are the 3? Vigraha means form, but he's the form of 3 things. Can you break down and tell me what are those 3 things? Prime cause, okay, Sarva Karana, but he's the form of 3 things. Yeah. Satchit Anand Vigraha. Yeah, Sutapa Mataji broke it down nicely. Sarva Karana Karanam is, yeah, he's not a form of that, but he's the cause of everything. Definitely correct. He's the cause of everything. And Vaishana Mataji also says, Hare Krishna. That comprises everything. Krishna and Krishna's energy. Okay, I know that was not meant as an answer. But now let's go on with that. And then we had started talking about his place of stay, where he stays. And let's just look there like that. Let me just bring up the advanced view because it'll be a good recap for us. And I'm going to switch off everything and leave only the verse text. We don't go into any of that. So we talked about that. And we said, Sahasra Patra Kamalam Gokulakya Mahatpadam. So we had started to describe his home, right, where he lives. And there are thousands of petals, right? That's how we were. Karnikaram Mahatyantram Shatkonam Vajrakilakam. And we described his plane as a hexagonal shape, right? The middle part of it is like hexagonal, and on the petals around it reside all the gopis and all those, but Krishna and Radha are right in the beginning of that that tan kiljal kam tan amsana tat tatrami shriyamapi. Kanjal again are the petals, so they're continuing to describe, and then they went on and also describe, Shuler Dashabir Anandam. So there are people who are standing in the 4 directions, and they are trying to prevent unauthorized entry into Goloka, because people can get into mystic powers and try to reach that, but they cannot, right? If they try to do that, then the tridents are going to cut them off to pieces, right? And there were more glorification of his dham. And then Atmaramasya tasyasi prakirtiyana samagamaha sad ananda paratparas. Again, we are talking about the blissful accept of it, right? Tektakalam Sishiksaya. So again, describing his body there. And then the main thing that came there was the regulatrix, his Radha, the supreme regulatrix, and we talked about others who come out of her, the Lakshmis and the Gopis, like that. And then we also talked about the the process of creation, how Krishna casts a glance at Radha, and then Radha reflects that glance and then sends it off to Durga, and that is how creation happens. Maya is Maya is inferior energy of Krishna. He doesn't dally with her directly, right? So we talked about that. We talked about the various causes, like you all pointed out today. He's the Sarva Karana Karanam, and we talked about that, how that Sarva Karana Karanam can be, how he becomes the cause of material creation. And we said that there is an original cause and there is an efficient cause, right? So material and the efficient cause. And then the material cause is Prithvi, Jal, Tej, Vayu, Akash, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. But then the efficient cause, the one that brings them all together, conglomerates all of them, and then creates, is the glance. And we said that the glance that he casts, that glance is actually called as Shambhu. So that's why sometimes we'll also read in some places that Shiva is the creator of everything. So that is why we say that Shiva is the creator of everything. And then we also talked about that, what does the glance contain? So on one end, there's all this dead material energy. And on the other end, we have got this Mahavishnu who's lying in the causal ocean. And that Mahavishnu then casts his glance on the material. So together with the glance, what else go? Together with the glance, from inside his body come out all the living entities which have gone there at the time of the previous cataclysm. When the whole universe was destroyed, all of them go and reside there. And also now they come out again through his glance, and they're embedded and put into all this material ingredients that are there. And then the creation happens. Then Brahma will start to do the other subsequent creations. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, we have primary creation, and then we have secondary, tertiary creation as well, right? So Brahma will do the secondary creation, and then the third level creation will be done by his sons, Daksha, and so on and so forth, like that. So we talked about that, and then today's verse is describing that Vishnu, and we have been also talking about the various aspects of Vishnu, right? We talked about 3 types of Vishnu. Now let's do a recap. Let's see how what are the 3 names? What are the 3 types of Vishnus that we can have? If anybody can quickly tell me what those 3 types can be. And Garima Mattaji, happy to see you here joining the call. And I need to go to the chat window to see what's happening in the chat. Right. So, right. He's the cause of everything. He's absolute knowledge. Yes, that is Chitpat. And then Garbo Dakshayi says Sukomal Radhe Mataji. And then Khyati Mataji says Mahavishnu. And again, Shiro Dakshayi again, okay, Sukolmati and Karano Dakshayi. So there's a 3 Garbo Dakshayi, Garbo Dakshayi, Garbo Dakshayi. Right. So collectively, amongst all of you, you got the 3 Vishnus lined up nicely. We have the Karano Dakshayi Vishnu, who is the Vishnu living in the, lying down on the causal ocean, right? And the causal ocean, the causal waters of the causal ocean. And something very interesting that I want to tell you about the waters of the causal ocean is that the waters of the causal ocean are created by Mahavishnu himself. So he creates those waters and he lies on them in Yoga Nidra, right? And from the pores of his body come out all these various universes. Now, if we go now a little further, fast forward a few thousand of years or thousands of years, and come to the state where, a state in time where you see that there's a universe is already being created, And there is Satyuga, which is happening there, right? And in Satyuga, there is a king known as Bali Maharaj. And Bali Maharaj was a devotee, although he was a devotee, but he was himself born in an atheist family, and it happens quite often. And so conquered, he had conquered the demigods also. Now, the demigods getting conquered is not a good situation, right? Because demigods are the godly people and they manage the world nicely. And so God actually favors the demigods because he wants good people to be in the administration, and the demigods administer. So, what do demigods administer? Can you tell me, what do they administer? What do the demigods administer? Let's see what's coming up there. And something coming up. Okay, so he administers the material desires, material elements. What else does he administer? The heaven. And you have a doubt about that, Kyati Vatiji? That he can't or won't? What do the demigods administer? Okay, yes, Indra is the king of the heavens, right? So he does administer that. So yes, so they administrate in the sense that they do manage this material world. So the things that happen in this material world by way of when there is going to be a volcanic eruption, when there's going to be a tsunami, floods, and then also, they also administer the planetary systems themselves, like you said, right? And then also, there are demigods that manage our bodies also. So there are demigods responsible for various organs functioning in our body, and all the way till of course there is death. There is Yamraj, handles that. So yes, Vaishana Mataji says that. So they are in charge of the administration of this material world because the Lord doesn't want to do anything, doesn't want to have anything to do with him. So these demigods, they're very opulent and they live in the heavenly planets. And so sometimes, because of the heavenly planets, there's so much of enjoyment also. So there's enjoyment, but they do their enjoyment keeping the Lord in mind. So we have to remember that there are two types of heavenly planetary systems. And so there are heavens, as we know, and they are above, located above in the hierarchy of the 14 planetary systems. So there are heavenly planets there. Then there are heavenly planets here also, in our plane also. They were heavenly. So where certain things will be heavenly, you might not get the grades of heavenliness. And then there are heavenly planets below us also, which is known as the Netherlands, right? You have heard of the word Netherlands. So that is, not on the geography, not on the map, but Netherlands, the lands that are below, which we know as Patal, Loka, Satal, Vital, Talatal, Mahatal, Rasatal. Those are the planets which are below. There also there is opulence and enjoyment. And actually, this will be news to some of you, that the opulence and the enjoyment in the Netherlands, that is in the Patal, Loka, etc., the opulence and enjoyment there is even more than the opulence that you get up over there in the higher planetary system. What is the difference between the two? The difference between the two types of enjoyment is that in the heavenly planets, people enjoy, but they also remember that there is God. So they are believers, they believe in God. People in the heavenly planets will do that. Now, you can believe in God and then yet you can do naughty things like Indra does, right? So you could be doing that and you can make mistakes and fall down every now and then, and that's okay because you're still under the modes of material nature, right? And then, but largely they are in the mode of goodness. Now, down below, in those planets, there's only enjoyment. There's no concept of God there. So it's a zero and there is a +1 on there. And in our planetary system where we are, right, the opulence is the minimum, the least opulence that we can think of is here. And we have this tendency that as soon as we get some money, we have this tendency, or opulence, gain some opulence, we have this tendency to forget about God. That's the thing about this, right? Now here also there is a little bit of heavenly. There's some heavenly areas here. For example, in India they used to, when they were describing Kashmir, they would say Kashmir is like heaven on earth. So yes, it is heaven on earth, but you have to remember heaven doesn't mean God. Heaven doesn't mean that Goloka has descended in Kashmir, right? It just means that it's a material place with a lot of beautiful things for you to enjoy, right? The beautiful scenic beauty and things like that. I mean, nowadays can't even say that. um, so those are the differences that so Bali Maharaj conquered all the planetary systems, the upper planetary systems, the middle planetary systems, and the lower planetary systems. All of them he conquered. He defeated the demigods, so much so that demigods were actually hiding here and there. And then Indra's mother Aditi did not like that her son was actually living in such a condition, so she prayed to the Lord, right, to come and help. And that's why the Lord takes birth as Vaman Dev, right, as a very small boy, right, small dwarf. He takes birth as a dwarf. And then we know that he tricks Bali Maharaj into giving him his entire kingdom, right? So what does he say? I just want 3 steps of land, right? So what does he do? Then he becomes Trivikrama. He increases his size and becomes big, right? So he increases his size and he becomes big. And in one step, he goes and covers all the way up to the middle planetary system. All are covered in one step. And then in the next step, he goes and covers all the way to the top of the universe, where our universe has got a covering, right? Our universe is like an egg. So his foot, left foot actually goes and touches the shell from inside, right? So that's what he does. And then for the third step, he asks Bali Maharaj, where do I put my third step? There is no space. Then Bali Maharaj says, put it on my head. And so then then Vamana puts his foot on the head of Bali Maharaj and presses him, and pushes him to the Netherlands, where he is staying even to this day. But then he agrees to go with him. Why? Because he is the devotee of the Lord, right? And Krishna says, I carry what he lack and I preserve what he have. Now he has devotional service. He has got devotional service, but if he goes to the Netherlands, devotional service will be all gone because it's the Las Vegas, you know. There is no sun also in the Netherlands. It's complete darkness, like Las Vegas, dark. But there are lights, there are other mechanisms by which those are lit and much more powerfully lit. And so he's staying there, and Vaman Dev is there by his side to make sure that some of the attractions of the Netherlands don't come and hit Bali Maharaj like that. So this was the story of of a tiny Vaman Dev, manifesting himself as the very big Trivikrama. And then in the second step, first step covers half the universe, and in the second step he goes and his foot touches the shell. Now, when his foot goes and touches the shell, the universe of the universe, the nail on his foot breaks that shell. You can imagine it's a very, very powerful nail, because the shell is very, very thick. It's very, very thick, and it's got layers of earth and water and fire and ether and mind and intelligence and ego. And each layer is 10 times thicker than the previous one. And I think the first itself is, thousands and thousands of miles. So it's such a thick crust, but his toenail breaks through that crust and a little hole is made. And from that hole, the waters of the causal ocean come inside this universe. And those waters are known as can you write and tell me what are they called? On that notepad, 1, 2, 3, what are they called? Those waters of the causal ocean, when they come inside the universe, pierced by the toenail of Trivikrama or Krishna, those waters are known as, anybody? Yeah, Varshana Mataji gets the right point, and she says that water is known as the Ganges, right? So that is where the Ganges is emanating. So the waters of the Ganges are not material, they are transcendental because the waters of the Kaushal Ocean are transcendental. Okay? Now, one of the things we also need to keep in mind is that how does Vaman Dev, who is like a kutti small boy, 3 feet tall, with a little umbrella and cute little boy, right? How does he become like that, so big, unimaginably big, right? That with his foot, he's going to be able to cover so much of land. One step and the second step, the entire universe is gone, completely covered. So how does that manifestation happen, right? We see pictures of Vaman Dev, very sweet, and we see pictures of Trivikrama also raising his left foot like that. So how is that possible? How does that happen? How do we see, right? So we have to understand certain fundamentals. We have to understand certain fundamentals of how the Supreme Lord exists, right? And we will talk a little bit about that when we pick up today's verse, which is 5.11, right? So let's go to 5.11 and let's look at what does 5.11 tell us. All right, so where are we? Brahma Samhita, and we will go 11. And it's a very famous and a popular verse. You all must be knowing about it, must have heard it somewhere or the other. We have definitely heard about this particular verse. And what this verse tells us is Sahasra Shisha Purushaha Sahasra Rakshaha Sahasrapad Sahasrabahur Vishwatma Sahasramsaha Sahasrasuhu Sahasrashisha Purushaha Sahasrakshaha Sahasrapad Sahasrabahur Vishwatma Sahasramsaha Sahasrasuhu. And if you look at the synonyms, let's see what are the synonyms telling us there. So Sahasra, we have to remember, Sahasra, right? There's no T over here, it is Sahasra. And you say Sahasra, Sahasra means 1,000. So 1,000 is Sahasra. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aharyat Brahmano Viduhu, right? Last time we had done that calculation of Brahma's life. So that was a Sahasra. Okay, so here they are saying Sahasra Shirsha. Shirsha means head. Shirsh, right? Shish Navav, when we say, right, in Hindi, it's coming from this Sanskrit Shirsha, which means head. So he's describing the Lord as possessing thousands of heads. And then Purusha means that he has got a form. He's a Purush, he's a being, right? He's not an energy or a concept or a power. Talking about manifestation, talking about a body, talking about a personality. Purusha is the Lord Mahavishnu, the first Purush Avatara, right? Sahasra Akshaha. Aksh means eyes, right? So Sahasra Akshaha means thousands of eyes. Sahasrapat. Sahasrapat, thousands of legs. Sahasrabahu, thousands of arms. One who possesses thousands of arms. Vishwa Atma, the super soul of the universe. Sahasra Amshaha, the source of thousands of avatars. Sahasra Suhu, the creator of thousands of individual souls. Right? So we are describing that he has, with respect to thousands of things, there are, I think, 6 that are defined. He has got thousands of this, thousands of that, or he does thousand of this or thousand of that, right? So let's go and try to, get that committed to our memory. So first thing he's saying, he's got Sahasra Shirsa, he's got thousands of heads. Shirsha means head. And then you come down and he's got thousands of eyes. He also has got thousands of arms. He's also got thousands of legs, right? And then he's the creator or the source of thousands of avatars or incarnations, thousands of incarnations. will come out. Many, many thousands will come out of him. And he's also the creator of thousands of individual souls. Suhu, that's what they said, right? Okay. So he possesses thousands of four things, right? Can you tell me what are the thousands of four things that I mentioned here? Four that he possesses. Thousands of this and thousands of that and thousands of that one and thousands of that one too. And so Tapa Mataji says head, soul, arm, and leg. And so Komal Radhe, the same thing. And we see Sadhana Mataji is typing, legs, arms, head, etc. Yes, he's come. And then he's the source of thousands of what? And there are two that are listed here. He's the source of some thousands of. Yes, avtaras and thousands of souls, right? So now it'll be easy for you to go back and look at this particular verse and see now he's saying Sahasra Shirsas, thousands of heads. Sahasra Rakshaha Sahasra Akshaha, Sahasra Akshaha. Akshaha means eyes, the thousands of eyes. Sahasrapat, legs. Sahasrabahu, arms, right? So that way it's easy for you to remember. Vishwatma, Vishwatma means that he's the soul of this universe. Sahasra Amshaha, Sahasra Shuhu. So Amsha means incarnations, right? And then Suhu is the soul. So that way it's easy for you to remember this particular verse like that. And let's see what do we have as the translation to this particular verse. So it says the Lord of the mundane world, Mahavishnu, possesses thousands of heads, eyes, and hands. He's the source of thousands of avatars in his thousands of subjective portions. He's the creator of thousands of individual souls. Purports by Srila Prabhupada, Mahavishnu is the object of worship of the hymns of all the Vedas, right? Mahavishnu, who is the object of worship of the hymns. And by the way, the purport is by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and not Prabhupada. Sorry about that. Mahavishnu, the object of worship of the hymns of all the Vedas, is possessed of an infinity of senses and potencies. And he's the prime Avtara Purusha, and he's the source of all the Avtaras. So other Avtaras will come via the Mahavishnu that we talk about, right? So this is what Mahavishnu has been described in the Brahma Samhita. Okay, just going on the by the now let's go and look at the second verse, which is verse number 12, and we'll do that as well. Continuing to describe, right? Narayana sa Bhagavan apastasmat sanat avirashit karanano nidhi sankarshanatmakaha yoga nidram gatastasmin sahasram shaha sahas swayam mahan. So now they're saying Narayan. So Narayan means named Narayan. That Vishnu is also called as Narayan. That Vishnu. Bhagwan, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Apaha, water. All right. Now I'll stop here and ask a quick question. When I say Apaha, do you all remember something? Apaha, do you remember reading this verse sometime recently? Reading something about it? Those who attend the Sunday classes, do you remember anything? Hmm? Water, yes, water, very good. And in what context did we talk about water recently? And I will give you a hint. Let's see. boat and water. And we talked about a large amount of water. We talked about boat and the wind, actually, not boat and water. Boat was on the water, but was being affected by the wind. And we talked about ocean. Yes, we talked about the ocean. And Apuryamanam Achila Pratishtam Samudramapaha Pravishanti Yadvat Tadvat Kamayam Pravishanti Sarve Sashanti Mapnoti Nakam Kami. Remember that? We were talking about the ocean and we said Apaha, which is constantly being filled with water. So same concept is also here. We are talking about Apaha, right? In this verse, the right? Tasmat, from that, Sanatanat, eternal person, Avirasit has sprung, Karan Arnaha, the causal ocean. Arnaha means ocean. Nidhihi means expanse of water. Sankarshan Atmakaha, the subjected portion of Sankarshan. Yoga Nidram Gataha, in the state of deep sleep. Tasmin, in that water. Sahasra Amshaha, with thousands of portions. And we talked just now in the previous verse, with thousands of portions. Swayam himself, Mahan, the Supreme Person. So the same Mahavishnu is spoken of by the name of Narayan in this mundane world. So now you know when we say that Mahavishnu and Narayan are one and the same, we are taking the reference from this particular verse in Brahma Samhita, number 12. So the same Mahavishnu is spoken of by the name of Narayan in this mundane world. From that eternal person, Sanatanath, has sprung the vast expanse of the water of the spiritual causal ocean. So he creates the waters of the Karan ocean, the subjective portion of Sankarshan. So Narayan comes from Sankarshan, who is an expansion of Krishna, who abides in Paravyoma. So where does Sankarshan live? Sankarshan is in the spiritual sky. Vyoma means sky. The above supreme person with thousands of subjective portions. So this Narayan will also have many, thousands of subjective portions, reposes in the state of deep sleep, yoga nidra, in the waters of spiritual causal ocean. So this Mahavishnu or Narayan is in yoga nidra. We have to remember yoga nidra is not like the nidra that we have. We go into nidra and we don't want to come out of that nidra, right? It's a totally different stage. Our sleep is different. It's not yoga nidra. Yoga nidra, that is called as a divine sleep, where he's aware of all that is happening. It's not sleep and gone completely. And has to be woken by alarm or something like that. So Yoga Nidra is spoken of as ecstatic trance, which is of the nature of bliss. So you remember we had talked in the beginning that he has got three, Sat, Chit, and Anand Vigraha. So he represents all this. And so Yoga Nidra actually is a trance-like situation, which is of the nature of bliss. So you get happiness in divine sleep. Bliss of the true subjective personality. So there's subjective, right? Himself and, personality explained by him. The above mentioned Rama Devi is the Yog Nidra in the form of Yog Maya, right? So previously in the previous verses, we had talked about Rama Devi and we had said that is no one other than Radharani. So it is Radharani who acts via her expansion. So Yog Maya is also an expansion of Radharani. And through the mechanism of Yog Maya, Mahavishnu goes into this divine sleep or this ecstatic trance that we have, right? So now we'll stop here and try to imagine, right? So there's this huge causal ocean, right? And which was created by Mahavishnu or Narayan, and Narayan is lying on that ocean right now. In the previous verse, we read that he has got thousands of hands and thousands of eyes and thousands of this and thousands of that, right? Now, let's look at the picture of Mahavishnu as we see. And let me see if I have one handy. I'll have to search Google to do that. Mahavishnu, an image of Mahavishnu. Let's see what comes up. And I will share that very quickly with you. Okay, so this is a typical picture that we see, photo that we see a lot, right, of Mahavishnu. Here, let me bring it up. It's taking its time. Here we go. Okay, so this is the Mahavishnu. And we are describing this Mahavishnu, and he's lying in the causal ocean, waters of the causal ocean. But my question here is, where are the thousands of hands and thousands of legs? How many does he have? Take out your notepads and let me know how many do you see in the picture? How many hands? How many legs? How many arms? How many eyes do you see? So we see four arms and yeah, and eyes. How many? Four arms, and we see two eyes. At least in this picture, we see only two, right? So how do we understand that, right? This seems to be, we're reading something in the Shastras, and it appears to be doesn't tally. We cannot reconcile what we're reading there with what is coming, um, what we are seeing there, right? So let's see what does that mean? How is this happening, right? So let us first look at a few verses from the Shastras, and we have to remember and go back to the story of Vaman Dev, right? And we were talking about that little Vaman Dev was converted into the big three Vikrama, who was so big that he was as big as the universe, that he was able to raise his legs and cover the entire universe through in two steps over there, right? So let's go and look at a few verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. And they are actually from the Divinity and Divine Service chapter, which is the famous chapter with the 34 verses. And we'll go towards the later part of this chapter, starting from text number 30. And I'll read those 30, I'll read those 4 or 5 verses there. In the beginning of the material creation, that absolute personality of Godhead Vasudev, in his transcendental position, created the energies of cause and effect by his own internal energy, right? So we have talked about the causes, material causes, etc. And so he does that. After creating, now this is very important, after creating the material substance, the Lord Vasudeva expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he's always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. So now he has entered into it, right? The Lord, as super soul, pervades all the things, just as fire permeates wood, and so he appears to be of many varieties, though he is the absolute one without a second. The super soul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes with the help of the subtle mind. Thus, the Lord of the universes maintains all the planets which are inhabited by the demigods, the men, and the lower animals, assuming the roles of incarnations. And we saw Sahasra Amshaha. So, assuming the roles of incarnation, he performs pastimes to reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. So, he comes and he does that. So, key point for us to note over here is that he creates Sa evedam sasarjagre, Bhagwan, Atma Maya. Yeah. So he does that through his energy, he creates. But the important words here is text number 31, which says, Taya vilasiteshveshu guneshu gunavan iva anta pravishta abhati vijnanena vrijambitaha. And what does it mean? After creating the material world, Lord Vasudeva expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he's always fully enlightened in his transcendental position, right? So we have to understand that he's here in this material world. And if we want to know how much he is in this material world, we will get to know about that later also. But I think I can bring this up to you right now. And this is further on in Brahma Samhita, we'll come to know about this particular verse, and it must be 32 or 34, one of those it will be. Pantastu Koti. Yeah, this is the one. So this verse says, Pantastu Koti Shata Vatsara Sampragamyo Vayurathapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimni Avichintya Tatve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So I worship the Govinda, the primal Lord. Only the tip of the toe of his lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extended over thousands of millions of years. So we have to understand this thing here, that it is not possible for us. It is not possible for us to understand the Lord. The Lord is achintya, and by our definition of what God is, God has to be achintya. And why do we say that? That why does God have to be achintya? Because if I am saying Ishvara Parma Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, so we say Ishvara Parma Krishna. So he's the supreme controller. He's the supreme of everything, right? So if Krishna is the supreme controller, then by definition, I should not be able to understand him fully. And why is that? Because if I am able to understand Krishna, that means I can bring Krishna under my intellect. I'm like, I'm done. I have conquered this part. I've understood him, right? He's not understandable by us. So there is a achintya aspect of Krishna which is there everywhere. And you will find those kinds of achintya aspects of Krishna in many places, in many other places in our scriptures also. For example, in the Ishopanishad, there's a verse in Ishopanishad which is mind-boggling. It's a mind-boggling verse. And what does that verse tell us there? It says, tad ejati tad nejati tad dure tadva antike tad antar asya sarvasya tad u sarva yasyasya bahyataha. So what that particular verse is actually telling us is very interesting. He says the Supreme Lord walks and he does not walk. He's far away, yet he is very, very near also, right? He is within everything and yet he's outside of everything. How can we just understand that, right? So how does he walk, how does he not walk? Because if we say that God only walks and God does not walk, so if you're saying God does not walk, this means there is some incompleteness in the Lord, right? And we are saying Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnas Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. The Lord is the complete supreme whole. Supreme Lord is the complete, so he cannot be complete. So with the Lord, if you were to ask questions, a yes question, then you will get a yes answer. You will get a no question, then you will also get a yes answer. Like, does the Lord walk? Yes. Does the Lord not walk? Yes. So it has to be. So these are things which are very difficult for us to understand that. And it is these contradictions that you see in the Shastras will make you understand the inconceivable potencies in which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says achintya bheda bhed tattva. So after talking about him, that he's got 1,000 arms. Now, when Arjuna sees Lord Krishna in the universal form in the Bhagavad Gita 11th chapter, there also he says, Kiritinam gadinam chakrahastam ichhami tvam drashtumaham tateva teneva rupena chaturbhujena sahasrabahu bhava vishvamurte. So this is after he sees that universal form of the Lord, where he sees thousands of heads in this direction, thousands of heads in that direction, fire coming out from him, and so on and so forth, right? He says, no, 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 Lord, do not. Oh, 1,000 arms, Sahasrabaho. So he says, oh, 1,000 arm Lord, I cannot see this form. I'm not happy seeing this form. I want to go back and see your hand, the four-armed form of the Lord. And you saw that beautiful four-armed form of Lord Vishnu that I showed you of Narayan. He says, I want to see that. And then I also want to see your two-handed form with the flute in your hand, because that's the form that pleases us the most, right? So how we say that Krishna has got 1,000 arms is because one way to try to explain that, and we will never be able to explain these statements completely because of the Achintya Tattva, is he's there everywhere. If he's there in every place, then he will have thousands of arms, right? Because this arm is also his hand. He operates through the thousands of expansions that he has. So those expansions also become his arms. And sometimes while we are at work, right? Or take, maybe a big personality like the president of a company or the president of an organization or a big political leader. So Mr. X is the big political leader. And then we say, Mr. Y is his right hand. What does it mean? Mr. Y is his right hand. Is Mr. Y his right hand? Like that? No. Right? Mr. Y is another entity, but because he does so much of the work that Mr. X does through him, that he's called as the right arm, right? And so many times people use the word, okay, can you become my extension? It basically means that I'm going to delegate some of my work to you, so you do it and you become my extension. So you can see Krishna in that form. So, it depends on how much the Lord wants to manifest before us and how much he wants to hide. And that will depend on our qualification. So just because we see that Lord has entered everything in this universe, right? Every atom of this universe, Anantarastha Paramanu, right? So says Brahma Samhita. So he's there even in the atom. So now he is there. But do we see the Lord everywhere? If I pick up this pen, where is that? Pen is made up of so many atoms. Where is the effulgence coming? I don't see the effulgence, right? Or there's a super soul inside me. The super soul or Shirodakshay Vishnu is so effulgent. He's Lord Vishnu. But why does no light come out of me, right? It's a matter of, am I going to manifest it for you or not, right? That's the Lord's prerogative. So in the pastime of Vaman Dev becoming Trivikrama, so all that is happening over there is the Lord is already there in the entire universe. All that he has to do is to manifest some portions of himself throughout the universe so that you see the big form, right? And in the form of Vamandev, he decided to expose only a smaller part of himself, right? And that is how you go and see that. So from today's verse that we picked up today, right? Sahasra verse, the thousands of this and thousands of that, if that is true, it's depending on how much he wants to show that. Sahasra Shirsha, you can see thousands of his heads, as Arjuna saw when he decided to show him the universal form, right? Sahasra Aksha also saw eyes, Sahasra Pad, legs, right? Sahasra Bahur Vishvatma, Sahash Amshaha Sahasra Suhu, right? So this is how this whole mechanism works. So I'm going to stop over here. We have a few minutes before the Bhagavad Ramayana reading today. And you can unmute yourself. I think you have the capabilities to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and ask any questions or any reflections that you have on this talk. So there is a hand raised, and that is Sutapa. Yes, please go ahead, Sutapa Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Mataji, Achintya, can you please describe that word a little bit? One more
Achintya?
time, I missed something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Achintya means that cannot be conceived with our mind. That our minds just cannot conceive it. Our minds are not geared to do that. For example, if you take a clinical thermometer, the thermometer that you use to measure your body temperatures, right? So it's up to how many degrees? Like I think at 103 or 108 we die, right? 103 we die. whatever, right? It'll be maximum 110. There's no need to calibrate the thermometer to measure temperature of 200 because there's no human being who can survive. So what's the deal measuring the temperature? So if you use that temperature, you can never measure temperatures which are higher. Why? Because there's a limitation of the instrument that you have in your hand, right? All that thermometer will do, if you put it and expose it to something which is 200, the thermometer will burst. If you expose the thermometer to something which is at 500 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll burst. That's all you will know. All that thermometer is capable of telling you is that this is more than 108, which is maximum I can handle, right? Beyond that, it cannot comprehend that because there's a limitation of the instrument. So, so just because that thermometer is not able to measure temperatures more than 108, it doesn't mean that temperatures more than 108 do not exist. Just because the instruments are blunt, it doesn't mean that the reality is not there, right? So, for example, I can say that, for myself, I don't see ultraviolet things which are ultraviolet, right? Or infrared. I don't see those items. That doesn't mean they don't exist. There are dogs who can see that, animals who can see that, right? So achintya, similarly, the limitations that is there in the thermometer, similarly, our intelligence or the intellect also has that limitation of not able to understand, because our intelligence is also made of material substance. So, and material substances cannot understand the spiritual. You will understand the spiritual only through the mercy of Krishna.
No.
Only through the mercy of Krishna, right? So, and then his mercy is so expansive that he says, Sarvasya chaham hidi sannivishta matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedescha sarve rahamev vedyo vedanta krit ved vedev chaham. So he's saying that I am the creator of the Vedas. And yes, he is. Although the Vedas emanate from Brahma, but he gives the Vedas, that understanding that Brahma has to be able to talk about the Vedas comes from Krishna. So he creates the Vedas, and Vedas actually describe also Krishna only, in truly, right? And then he says, through the Vedas, I am to be understood. So he's talking about understanding. So if you have to understand the Vedas, Krishna, you have to go it through the medium of something which is transcendental. And Vedas are transcendental because they're emanating from Krishna, right? And he's Hriday Sannivishta, it is his mercy that he has entered everything and has come very close to our hearts. And he's manifesting there. And from there, he wants to guide us. And the only thing is that his mercy is there for us all the time. Our instruments are not sharp enough, are not polished enough, and are not clean enough to be able to capture and to be able to see what Krishna is saying. And to clean our instruments, what we have to do Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahada Vagni Nirvapanam, right? So we have to cleanse the mirror of our mind. And one of the ways to cleanse it is to chant the holy names of the Lord. So Achintya basically is saying that I am not understandable through or comprehended, cannot be comprehended through the intellect, the material intellect. Yes, Sukomalade Mataji, I see an eager hand there. Go ahead.
I just need
Thank you, Mataji.
which is the verse that you just quoted for
Oh,
explaining it.
15.15. Okay, thank you. 15.15. Yeah.
Sahasra chaham.
Sarvasya chaham hidi sannivishta. Sannivishta, it's very important, that he's very close to your heart. He comes and stays inside you. What more do we want, right? So he's there. It's for us to turn our hands or raise your hands as Sadhana Mataji has raised. So we'll go to her now.
Okay, so just a couple of questions. When you talked about primary, secondary, and tertiary creation, I was trying to put that into like an example. So would the primary be the Mahavishnu, then the secondary be the thousands of souls that he is part of, or the thousands of avatars, and then the tertiary creation? Just examples.
I will give you. Yeah.
Okay.
So there are. I would say I would not put it that way. I will bring in one more aspect of it, right? And that is expansions, right? So we talk about expansion. We can also talk about expansions as primary and secondary, right? So there is Mahavishnu, From Mahavishnu, you will get the Shirodakshay Vishnu and, the Garbhodakshay Vishnu inside each planet. So this Mahavishnu is expanding and going into individual universes, not planet, individual universes as Shirodakshay and Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So now if you go inside the universe, we see there's a Garbhodakshay Vishnu lying at the bottom. So there is one Garbhodakshay Vishnu in every universe, right? And then there is a Shirodakshay Vishnu. Shir means milk. So there's an ocean of milk inside every universe. And over there also, there is a Vishnu lying. He's known as Shirodakshay Vishnu. Now, the thing about the Shirodakshay Vishnu is that in every universe, there is not one Shirodakshay Vishnu. There are millions of Shirodakshay Vishnu. And the reason for that is that not only does Shirodakshay Vishnu lie in the waters of the causal ocean, Shirodakshay Vishnu also lives in our heart. So when we talk about Paramatma in our heart, that is the Shirodakshay Vishnu. So here we are talking about primary, secondary, and third expansion type of expansions of coming from the Lord. So that is one way of expanding, right? And that expansion is happening on a transcendental plane, right? It's all transcendental. When we talk about creation, we are talking about what I was talking about the material creation. So the primary creation there is that somebody has to create the basic substance, right? Like this body is made up of earth, water, fire. Who made earth? Who made like I will go and say, I made some puris today. Okay, so how did you make the puri? Oh, you took some flour. Where did the flour come? Oh, I got it from the chop. Like that, right? Then you come to the seed. Who made the original seed? That's why we say Sarva Karana Karana, the original cause of everything, right? So that first creation of the basic substances which are required is known as a primary creation. And then there will be a secondary creation, like, right, the Brahma is born, right? And then after Brahma's children are there, right? Manu is there. Then Manu goes and procreates and creates all the human beings and other forms of life come like that, right? So, and then after that, Manu's children also start creating, like Daksha, right? Daksha is very expert at creating. He's Daksha at that. Daksha means an expert. So he goes and creates subsequent progeny. And so those are the creations. Atra Sarga, Sarg and Sarg means creation, and Visarg means subsequent creations or sub-creations, right? So there is Atta, which is the main creation. From that, I can do one creation, Puri. I can also make Gulab Jamuns. I can also make, kachoris and so on and so forth like that. So those are the creations that we're talking about there. And Varshana Mataji has raised her hand. And
Can I just ask a question relative to that, though?
okay.
So then, going back to the glance and the Maya, the Yoga Maya, is Yoga Maya then still in the transcendental expansion side or the material creation side?
Yoga Maya is transcendental because she's Krishna's energy, right? So Yoga Maya definitely is on the transcendental plane, right? And then there is, the other Maya, the Durga that we see. She's also transcendental, but she manages the material world, right? Just like, a person can come, a prison, superintendent of a prison is not a prisoner, right? Is not a prisoner. Prisoners are prisoners, us. But then there's Durga also, who is the superintendent of this prison where all of us are right now, right? And she's a devotee of the Lord, and she's doing the thankless job, as Prabhupada says. She's doing the thankless job of punishing us so that we come to our senses and stop doing things which are, wrong. Yeah, like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Varshana Mataji, and I'll have to make it the last because the Ramana reading is starting here. Go ahead, Varshana Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Mataji, I think I heard it wrong or correct, I don't know. Shirodakshay Vishnu stays as in the form of Paramatma in every entity. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Everyone's heart, yeah. And Garbhodakshay is at the bottom of the universe. Garbh, right? Remember Garbh, the lotus coming out from his navel, right? That is Garbhodakshay. Okay, Aruni Mataji, I'll have to rush through that answer because I need to go there for the class, but go ahead to ask and we'll see.
Yeah, just very quickly. So about, I'm just confused about Durga. You said the previous time I thought you had said she's an expansion of Radharani, but a material manifestation. But just now you said she's transcendental, but manages the material, supervises the material, the material aspect. So which is it? So she is
An
a
expansion.
trans.
She's an expansion of Radharani, so she will be a spirit,
She will be what?
spiritual, transcendental,
Oh, okay.
right? And she manages our world.
But then she's a
You are
demigod.
also transcendental, right? You are also transcendental. Are you not? You are a soul. We are all transcendental. Through false ego, we are thinking we are this body.
But Durga is a demigod.
Yes,
So she's off the material planets.
yes. So there are concepts like, and maybe we'll have to take it up later, but I'll give you a quick 2-sentence answer. There is Shakti. There is a Shakti Tattva, right? And there is a Jiva Tattva. We are Jiva Tattvas. And Durga and Radha and all that, they come from the Shakti Tattvas, right? We are Jivas, they're transcendental, they are Shakti, they are transcendental. And they can come here.
But they're all still of the material planets, not the spiritual planet.
Yes. Well, you know what? It's a little bit complicated. Shiva is in between the two of them. He's in between the material and the spiritual. He's not 100% spiritual. And Durga, there are certain elements which are missing in them, some percentages. Nectar of Devotion talks about that in detail, how much Vishnu is, how many percentage Brahma has, how many percentage of qualities of Krishna Shivji has, how much each of these Vishnus have got, and how much Krishna, of course, is 100%. So all these other expansions do not manifest all the things. And so if Shambhu is a glance, then glance is coming from Krishna. So how can it be material and things like that? So it is Achintya, but a quick short answer to your question. Yeah.
Oh, so it is Achintya. Okay.
It is Achintya, yeah. We get confused. Even we get confused like this. Shiva, if he is beyond this material nature, then why does he do things like grant boons without thinking, right? He's known to do that. Now, which would think like he's then acting in the mode of ignorance. How can a person who is transcendental act in the mode of ignorance, right? So yeah, there are instances of that happen, which is difficult for us to understand. But they happen. And so at some parts of the scripture, they say that because he handles the mode of ignorance, so sometimes he gets affected by that. Like, oh, how do you get affected by that? So then it's like, okay, because he's not 100% there are certain percentages which are less. Yeah, I'm forgetting the percentage. I think Brahma was 72 or something like that. Yeah, doesn't have all the even the Vishnus don't have all the qualities of Krishna. And here's the interesting thing that which complicates the matter is that, well, then don't we say that Vishnu is a plenary expansion of Krishna, which means he's exactly the same as Krishna? Then how is he lacking in the qualities? So the lacking in the qualities is that how much are they manifesting you? So Vishnu will be the same as Krishna, but you don't see that. So Vishnu will have a flute, you don't see the flute, because in that form he doesn't show you all that, like that. So it's complicated. Incarnations are very complicated. There's Brihad Bhagavatamita, you can read that. I got even more confused by reading that, so I have to stop reading that and say, let me go back to the Bhagavatam and read that. Yeah, it's complicated. But for this yoga, it is good as long as we just say Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
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 Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama.
And we're going to meet
Hare
tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Daylight Time, whatever time you're following these days. And
Thank you so much, Shraddha Mataji.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much.
And those of you who attended
Thank you so much,
yesterday, last week or the week before, whenever we did that, I'm looking for recordings from you, right? The homework.
Okay, Mataji, we will do.
Yeah.
Is it the recordings of the 2 verses that we were assigned? Is it the 2 verses we were assigned each?
No, 2.70.
Yeah.
There you go. There was only one, 2.70, and you were supposed to memorize it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Purvumanam.
Yes, Apuryamanam. Okay.
Yeah.
With that said, yeah, Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyascha patitanam pavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.
Vaishnavibhyo namo namah.
Hari Hari Bol.
Vande Hari Hari Bol.
Yeah.
जी दंडवत प्रणाम
Hare
श्री
Krishna
जी।
Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji.